Diamond P Sports presents And They Walked Away, Volume 4. Well, the hits just keep on coming. Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Evans, and welcome to the latest helmet-hammering, bone-jarring thrill ride featuring motorsport's most perilous moments. I mean, we've got all your favorites: drag racing, stock cars, sprints, monster trucks, and for this fourth in Diamond P's Classic Series, something brand new. For the first time, we're going to show you 200-mile-an-hour unlimited hydroplanes and monster 50-foot offshore boats as they challenge the liquid racetrack. As always, we salute the vehicle constructors, the motorsports organizations, and the rescue crews who make it possible for these competitors to indeed walk away. Okay, tighten up that chin strap, cinch down those belts. Let's get started. Roll tape, Stan. Let's start our parade of motorsports greatest hits with NHRA Top Fuel action. In 1993, two of the true kings of the sport met in the final of the Cheap Auto Parts Winter Nationals in Pomona. Kenny Bernstein in the far lane faced five-time Winston Top Fuel champ Joe Amato. Kenny has won a lot of races, set a lot of records, but nothing could prepare him for this. The engine blows, the lefter is slick blows. Kenny careens behind Amato, into the rail, over the rail. Amato's crew not yet aware of the catastrophe that has befallen Kenny Bernstein. Raw fuel pumps out of the ripped lines, no fire. In moments, the NHRA Safety Safari was on the scene, spraying down the wreck to cool things off and extricate Kenny Bernstein from the still intact cockpit. The chassis held up amazingly well. Now, don't get me wrong, slamming into anything at any direction at the speeds of an NHRA Top Fuel car is going to get your attention. But thanks to the sound construction of the car chassis, and believe it or not, even the design of the rail that the car impacted on, Kenny Bernstein was able to walk away from this terrifying crash. What's amazing here is how the engine breaks away from the chassis and tumbles down the track. It is engineered to do just that. Now there you see the engine rolling clear of the wreck, and Kenny's still strapped into his cockpit as the rest of the car tumbles and slides to a stop, while unburnt fuel gushes to answer the call of a power plant that had long since departed. I must admit, at the time, I didn't know what to expect. But when we got to the scene, we were surprised to find a battered and shaken Kenny Bernstein on his feet being examined by medical personnel. Kenny, you are indeed okay?
I'm okay, Steve. Tell everybody I'm fine. I'm bell rung a little bit. Kind of feel like a NASCAR Cup car driver here at Atlanta, but not too bad.
Kenny, what is a Nathan Cup car? I tell you, I was just glad to see that he could talk. And one thing for sure, the safety standards built into the racing machines had proven their worth once again. And it saved yet another competitor from disaster. Later that same season at the '93 Gator Nationals in Gainesville, Florida, veteran Jack Ostrander in the far lane during qualifying got another taste of the Top Fuel catastrophe. This is a weird one. In a fraction of a second, Jack went from heads up full speed ahead racing to looking backwards at his engine and wing. I have seen a lot of drag racing incidents, but this one I have to call just plain weird. The trouble came as he approached the lights at the end of the run. Ostrander's car appears to buckle, watch this, and snap right behind the cockpit. Right there. You know, the power generated by these 4-second nitro rockets is sometimes more than a match from the materials from which they're constructed. The smallest weakness can lead to big-time trouble as you approach 300 miles an hour. From this angle, you can see the car literally snap in two. Unbelievable. Now it tosses the front end to the side and smashes it into the retaining wall. The impact ruptures the fuel tank in the nose of the car, igniting nitromethane fuel on the spot, but luckily Ostrander was spun completely around backwards and left the fireball in his wake. Thanks to the safety precautions taken by both the driver and the vehicle constructor, the fragile human body was once again saved from fire, high-G impact, and flying debris. Jack would race again, but the same could not be said for this machine. Having finished less than a burnout away from the '92 championship and having set a record low ET of 4.78 in the first race of '93, Corey McClanathan was on the fast track of Top Fuel success as he left the line in Rockingham, until he was derailed by an ugly twist of fate. Corey was thrown into the wall and hurtled upside down and backward down the track as fire engulfed the wreckage of the independent Mack Attack dragster. The flaming Hulk came to a merciful halt right at the feet of the waiting safety safari, who quickly extinguished the fire. But as the ruptured engine bled hot, scalding oil, young Corey lay trapped upside down in the wreckage. This was a horrible incident. And it all started as the struts supporting the wing over the Mack Attack dragster collapsed just as the car was approaching the finish line. With the wing gone and no downforce being exerted on the rear end, Corey just flat lost control of the car. In this case, breaking off the rear wheel assembly, cracking the engine block, igniting an oil fire, and flying out of control into the retaining wall. Now, the impact with the wall breaks the rear end free from the rest of the car, which continues to streak like a terrible comet down the track, with Corey strapped into the cockpit, engulfed in flame. Corey suffered burns on his hands and face in that fiery inferno and did miss the next 4 races, but he was back, unfortunately not for the championship chase. The 1993 Top Fuel Trail of Terror next led to Topeka, Kansas, where another young nitro pilot, this time Doug Herbert, suffered a devastating crash during qualifying. Herbert's nightmare began well into a high-speed run as the left rear tire explodes on the hot racetrack, sending his uncontrollable car into a hard left and slamming into the wall at nearly full speed. Even after the first impact with the wall, Herbert's car had enough momentum to boomerang back across the track, snap the rear of the frame off just behind the cockpit, and slam into the opposite wall. The airborne front end of the car landed on the outside of the wall, slammed the ground hard, and tumbled through a nearby scaffold. Now, that scaffold was unoccupied and may have served as kind of a catch net for Herbert. It could have been worse. The highest wall in all of drag racing, and still, Herbert hurdles it. Amazingly, Doug suffered only a concussion from the incident and returned to race in the next event in Denver. Needless to say, this car did not make that trip. It's drag racing at its dirtiest. Mud bog racing, a wild and woolly open-wheel run which have brung grassroots motorsports competition. And believe me, it's an all-out gritty exercise conducted on an unpredictable surface that, well, it's mud. All right, let's get the dirty work underway from Lima, Ohio and the Spring Nationals. Now, this is Tony Farrell and his Blue Ribbon Bandit. He's competing in the paddle tire event. They're called paddle tires because of the vulcanized scoops on the rear wheels. Off they go. And unfortunately, Farrell's paddles seem to be heading on downstream, leaving him up the river without a, well, you know. Now, it looks like the left rear tire is still racing, and as a matter of fact, turned in a respectable time as it headed for the garage area. See ya, Tony. The driver was unhurt in this incident except for his pride. After having his rear wheels heisted mid-race, you can be sure that the Blue Ribbon Bandit's owner will tighten down those lug nuts with an extra twist next time. You know, wild things always happen during mud races in Sedalia, Missouri. And Doug March in the aptly named Hard Times Jeep found out just how wild it can get. Marsh in the near lane gets pitched out of the mud bog at full speed and proceeds to pay the price. Ooh, that hurt. He was okay, though. Now watch the left side of your screen. What really happened was he got out of shape at the end of the run, then hooked a rut and simply tumbled right out of the course.
Doug, it looked to me like you were just making a straight run. What caused it to let go like that?
I don't know. I was just getting ready to let out when I come out at the end, and all at once it just spun sideways, started rolling.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's happened before. It'll happen again. But I ain't quitting.
We didn't think you would. A tough breed, these mud racers, and Jim McConville here is no exception. Now, Jim's a real hell-bent for leather kind of guy. But here in Sedalia, he and his Mr. Four-Wheeler Machine had problems as they faced off against Gary Fain and the Mud Tough Jeep. With superchargers on these motors, they make tremendous horsepower. The race only lasts a couple of seconds, but damn near anything can happen. Just like Marsh, McConville's trouble started as he exited the 180-foot mud pit. Mr. Four-Wheeler takes him on a punishing tumble on the hard pack of the Missouri State Fairgrounds. The roll bar saves another one. He was just fine. Now, in replay, you'll see the problem these mud racers face. McConville has to oversteer to compensate for the tremendous torque that the 500 cubic inch blown big block Chevy generates. As he exits the pit and gets off the gas, it's almost like reversing the torque and tosses the vehicle into a roll. I think everyone knew that Jim McConville was indeed okay as he walked away from the wreckage of the Mr. Four-Wheeler wearing his lucky hat. I'd get rid of that thing. At the 1994 Spring Nationals, Rodney Covington in the far lane was ready to go all out against the four-time champ Tom Martin when all hell broke loose. The Mud Rat went from a $70,000 highly specialized race machine to a worthless pile of junk in seconds, leaving Covington dazed in the overturned cockpit. Woo. As we take another look, Covington on the right of your screen seems to be fighting to keep the Mudder in the ruts. As he exits the pit, right about there, he rolls up and over a berm that puts him into a hard right. As Rodney tries to steer out, he barrel rolls and ends up biting the dust, big time. Covington was transported to the local hospital and was pronounced okay, at least physically. His Mud Rat buggy took the worst of the incident and saved Rodney from serious injury. Unlimited hydroplanes, the world's fastest racing boats. These machines literally fly across the water surface at speeds over 200 miles per hour. Turbine engines power these race boats as they battle on the liquid oval. And at 200 miles an hour on the always changing surface of water, Thunderboat pilots can find themselves over the edge in a heartbeat.
Chip Hanauer powers hard into the turn. He gets airborne. Chip Hanauer going over in turn number 1. He was trying to break to the front of the pack. He had the inside lane. He's upside down in the water.
It can happen that quick. Streaking across the surface 1 second and the next soaring into the sky, only to crash back down into the water with disastrous results. Actually, the name says it all, hydroplane, a boat that acts like an aircraft. As the Miss Budweiser accelerates, her aerodynamic hull is launched skyward. But as the prop loses contact with the surface, all forward thrust is lost, and the airborne Thunderboat plummets back into the water. All hydroplane pilots are protected by a cockpit canopy that deflects the water's crushing impact. Now, the rescue crew quickly extricated Hanauer from the overturned race boat through an emergency hatch in the hull. Chip suffered a couple of broken ribs, but it could have been a whole lot worse, and he knew it more than anybody. Here's the piston-driven Old Boy Oberto racing on Lake Washington near Seattle. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that sets boat racing apart from other motorsports is the fact that these racecraft compete on the ever-changing surface of water. The Oberto hits some small rollers and is tossed off the course and nearly overturns. Even in an incident like this one, the wall of water generated at impact could severely injure a driver. That's why the canopies are such an important safety factor. Now, you can see the results of getting bumped around in the water at only 150 miles per hour. The driver was uninjured in this mishap. The only injury to the driver, some bruises from the seat belt. That's not a surprise. The Detroit River has been the site of hydroplane racing since the late 20s, and today it's still one of the premier stops on the Thunderboat Tour. In the '89 Detroit race, Scott Pierce, piloting the Miss Pringles, was battling to keep the lead in Heat 1B when his high-tech race boat, watch this! Houston, we have liftoff. A terrifying 200-mile-an-hour blowover. The Pringles landed right on top of the cockpit and rolled over into an upright position. The cockpit again credited with saving Scotty Pierce's life. As you can see, the impact tore off the rear stabilizing wing and destroyed the engine housing. As he prepared to make the pin in turn 3, the bow lifts and the boat is immediately thrown into the air and over, crashing back down into the Detroit River on its back. Ugly. The cockpit canopy protecting the pilot from impact remains intact and the boat rolls right side up. The specially trained waterborne safety teams of the URC were right on the scene and extricated Pierce moments after the impact. His only complaint? A sore ankle. Historians will note that George Woods won the 1988 San Diego race, but every boat racer and fan will remember this long after the history books are on the shelf. Two boats both encounter the same conditions at just the wrong moment and both blow over in spectacular fashion. The Circus Circus, piloted by John Prevost, and the Holset Miss Madison with Ron Snyder in the cockpit, lay side by side in Mission Bay after a 1 in a million freak accident. You know, the blowover is a frightful but not uncommon occurrence in the world of unlimited hydroplanes, but never before or since have two Thunderboats launched off the water surface and experienced simultaneous blowovers. In replay, we'll follow Prevost and the Circus Circus as little by little the bow lifts and the hydroplane takes off. The pilot is just a helpless rider in a 200-mile-an-hour uncontrolled flight. As the Circus Circus crashes to the surface on its stern, the wood and composite hull is broken in two by the force of the impact. In this head-on replay, we can see the Circus Circus on the left lifts off first, but less than a second later, the Madison is in trouble. Both boats fly a couple 100 feet in the air and then crash back into the bay. The Madison falls through the rooster tail of the passing Oberto boat and lands upside down in the water. Both pilots were treated for injuries and returned to racing after this truly unique incident in the history of motorsports. Racing fans across America's heartland thrilled to the action of these winged wonders, dirt track sprint cars. And the stands at the '94 Knoxville Nationals were filled to capacity when Andy Hillenberg's machine made an unexpected run at leaping the wall. Quite a leap indeed. The surface of the track gets hard-packed and very greasy in no time at all. In fact, that's the way the drivers like it. But no one likes to slide out of the turn and take an up-close view of the sign painter's artwork a good 20 feet off the track, especially in a speeding open-wheeled racer. The Sprinter sustained considerable damage. Andy, well, he walked away from his high-flying aerial display. Now, let's get on with the action from NHRA's Funny Car Division. Forget about that green and white car. Nope, this isn't another fiery John Force burn it to the ground on every run extravaganza. In this episode of And They Walked Away, we're in search of the successor to John's title of unintentional funny car stunt driver. First off, Al Hoffman at the '93 Motorcraft Ford Nationals in Phoenix. In the blink of an eye, Hoffman's car goes from race winner to a rolling inferno with Al in the cockpit surrounded by flame. Unable to see, much less stop the car, Hoffman travels into the desert past the end of the track, his vehicle hopelessly engulfed in a raging fire. From the finish line, we see the engine let go just as he streaks across a head of force. A valve hangs, filling the cylinder with fuel. The piston can't compress the unburnt fuel and kicks a hole in the block. Hot oil gushes from the cracked engine and ignites on the white hot headers, all in a fraction of a second. And now is when seconds really count. Al must steer clear of the wall, stay out of the other competitor's lane, bring his burning race car to a stop, and exit the wreckage before he's overcome from the heat and smoke. Here you can see the exploded engine pieces and parts racing along ahead of the fiery Hulk as it slides, fully involved in the flame, to the end of the track. And not unlike the Phoenix, Al Hoffman rises from the ashes of his race machine. He suffered some superficial burns, a little smoke inhalation, but was otherwise unhurt. Hoffman's car? Well, that's another story altogether. The engine in the machine split right in half.
This car hasn't had an engine explosion in a year and a half, so we put a brand new set of connecting rods in at that run, and I'm suspecting that we must have had one that was not up to snuff because it had no reason for doing that. The engine was fine after the last run.
Tommy Anderson, like all crew chiefs, embarrassed by a moment like that. They feel they shouldn't happen. You know, next up on our tour of funny car pyromania from the 1993 Winter Nationals, Flash Gordon Mineo in the far lane. He hydraulics the engine in qualifying with the predictable result. Just 2 races later, Mineo pulls into the lights in Houston in his rebuilt car to face up against Brent Fanning. But in seconds, Mineo's attention turned from the funny car quarter-mile battle Yep, you got it. To fighting another blazing fire that engulfed his machine in seconds. Flash Gordon manages to bring the burning car to a stop and begins to make his escape. Holding his breath, he releases the 5-point harness system and then squeezes out of the tight confines of the funny car's protective roll cage through the roof hatch. That's why it's there. All the time surrounded by flame and noxious smoke from the burning carbon fiber body. Now, Mineo came out through the roof hatch, jumped clear of the burning wreck, and then started to raise the body himself to try to save what he could of the race car. But it was too late.
I can't keep rods in it. Every time I step on it, it's over.
Thank God for the safety factors built into this automobile. At least we're talking.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm getting sick of this deal, I tell you. I got to do something quick.
First thing I'd do is lose the nickname, Gordon. It was not long before we once again saw Mineo in trouble, this time in Topeka, Kansas. He lit up the quarter mile in a 280-mile-an-hour firestorm. Mineo brings the rolling inferno to a safe stop just as the NHRA Safety Safari is on the scene to put out the fire and get Gordon out of the burning car. In this replay, we can see the magnitude of the fire as the Safety Safari is literally waiting on the burning car to arrive. And even while totally involved with flame, Mineo does an incredible job of keeping his car in his lane. And it's a testament not only to Gordon's experience and driving skill, but also to the design and construction of these cars. And the safety gear that allows a driver to be able to walk away from a drive through hell.
I really don't know what happened in there. I don't know if it blew through the clutch, pitched the rod out, what happened. It wasn't all that bad of a run, I didn't think.
No, it was not. You're used to fighting these fires.
Yeah, I guess I had to open up a little school, huh? Everybody else has.
We now begin the chronicle of the long, hot summer of '93 as seen through the eyes of Mr. Whit Bazemore. Whit's funny car trial by fire begins at the aptly named Firebird Raceway in Phoenix. The fast orange machine grenades an engine and slowly winds its way to a stop while uncontrolled fire envelops the car. Again, the Safety Safari on the scene in seconds pierces the shroud of caustic smoke and moves in to assist Bazemore from the cockpit. But Whit motions that he wants to take his time exiting the smoldering ruins of his car, a luxury he won't have very often. Now, the next stop on Bazemore's cross-country fireworks show was The Rock, Rockingham, North Carolina, to Winston Invitational. And once again, the engine lets go, and Whit's fighting fire before mid-track. He was able to get the chutes out, however, and brought the car to a quick stop just past the finish line. Whit's next task, getting out from his flaming hot seat in the cockpit through a blinding wall of smoke and flame. It's not something any driver wants to have to get good at. When the fire-weary Fast Orange team came to the line at the '93 Spring Nationals, things took a more serious turn. Much more serious. Bazemore's car exploded with such fury that after hitting both guardrails, it was reduced to basically a burned-out sled. And miraculously, Bazemore releases himself, stands up, and steps out of what was his funny car. In replay, as Whit accelerated down the track, his engine exploded with so much destructive power it lifted the entire car off the track, shredding both rear slicks and disintegrating the rear of the body. At this point, Bazemore was a helpless rider as the machine hurtled into the near side guardrail and was tossed onto its side. Still traveling maybe 100 miles an hour, the wreck impacted the other rail, snagging what was left of the body and turning right side up. But in an incident like this, the best possible scenario is to lose the fiberglass body, which burns far longer than the engine after an explosion. Looking at what was left, you wouldn't think I'd be talking to the guy who moments before drove this car through such destruction.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a funny car racer, and I'm a funny car racer now, but every once in a while you got to have second thoughts, and we'll be back, I'm sure. My head's a little sore right now.
You can believe that Whit's whole body was feeling the result of this crash for a while. We give our "and they walked away" unintentional stunt driver award to Whit Bazemore for his funny car pyrotechnics. He clinched it with this boomer at the '93 finals in Pomona. Whit turns his sedan into a roadster with a horrific engine explosion. And there's no real fire. The concussion of the blast and the fire suppression system simply knocked the flames down before it could ignite the body. And there they are, the white knights of the safety safari. Bazemore wearily signals, "I'm okay," and exits the car, ending a season of mishaps. It was an expensive year of drag racing for Mr. Whit Bazemore, one he won't soon forget. Us either. The world of offshore powerboats, one of the most unique forms of motorsports. Crews of up to 4 individuals ride herd on over 4,000 horses, generated by as many as 4 power plants, screaming through the seas at top speeds topping 140 miles per hour. Our look at professional offshore powerboat racing focuses on the waters of the Florida Keys, specifically Marathon, Florida. It's here where the Gulf of Mexico meets the Atlantic that many classic racing battles have taken place. And this is also one of the most treacherous areas when it comes to water conditions. Unlike most forms of motorsports where the driver has a consistent track on which to compete, offshore racers must contend with the constantly changing surface of the sea. Here, driver Chris Lavin and his throttleman Don Roberts are in the biggest water on the course when they strike an itinerant wave and are launched skyward in their supercharged Jesse James. The driver and the throttleman must react in tandem to each wave individually in order to get optimum performance from their machine and keep it under control. In this case, too much power coming off a wave put them at the wrong angle for re-entry into the water. Air gets under the boat and she rolls. Cockpit canopies saved both men's lives. In the same waters off the Florida Keys, a year later, Al Kropp and his teammate were boiling up the water in their Baja catamaran, Cat. During the course of the race, both of the tie rods that connect the outdrives and enable the driver to steer the boat had become disconnected. A very serious condition at any speed. They got no clue. Intent as they were winning the race, neither competitor noticed the problem until it was too late. The Cat team went from over 100 miles per hour to 0 in a bone-crushing impact that capsized the race boat. Imagine finding yourself strapped upside down underwater in the middle of the ocean. Offshore racers train to overcome disorientation and learn to exit the cockpit before they run out of air. In replay, you can see the race boat skips off a roller and the driver is unable to correct his course. The boat then turns broadside into the next wave and is overturned. An air rescue team plucked the crew from the water with relatively minor injuries, thanks once again to a cockpit canopy system. We move now to 1991. The blue-green waters off Marathon Key can appear deceptively serene as the crew of the custom skater catamaran Hyperactive found out the hard way. You can gauge by the distance that our photo chopper traveled after the impact just how fast the boat was going when it nosed into the water. The impact literally tore the boat in half, leaving the crew, Tom Slamecka and Dave Cutler, floating in the water with the debris. In replay, we can see exactly what happened. After the race boat launched into the air, her stern catches the next wave, which forces the bow down hard into a third wave. The impact rips open the deck and the force of the water through the hull tears the boat in half. Bob Kaiser and Errol Lanier, who just moments before had been racing adversaries of the Hyperactive team, leapt from their race boat to help them into the water. Rescue teams then moved in to get the crew to safety, the most serious injury being some fractured ribs. Okay, it's time for the heavy metal of motorsports. The 10-foot-tall, 10,000-pound behemoths called monster trucks. These machines leave the line like a pro stock drag racer, leap 20 feet into the air over sets of crushed cars, all in search of low ETs. These racers thrill fans from coast to coast with their unique brand of motorsports excitement. And never was the old adage truer: the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Let's start the Monster Mash with action at the 93 Thunder Drags from Canfield, Ohio. Here's the Executioner, a 5-ton Chevy driven by Mark Hall. Now, the dirt here at the Canfield Fairgrounds also doubles as a tractor pulling course and is elevated just enough to give Hall and his Executioner an unexpected detour during qualifying. Kaboom! That's 10,000 pounds of race truck tumbling like a child's toy. The truck's body takes the rollover pretty hard, but the roll cage protecting the driver is intact. From this head-on replay, we see that just as the high hauler clears the crushed cars, the right rear tire slips down the embankment. Hall tries to save the big truck by cutting the wheel and increasing the power, but it's just not enough to keep it from going over. Mark Hall walked away from this qualifying incident, and after dusting off and putting his truck back on its wheels, went on to make the first round of competition. Amazing. From the heartland, we move way down south to Naples, Florida, and the world-famous Mile of Mud at the Florida Sports Park. The first-round matchup featured Wayne Smozanik of Jupiter, Florida against the dreaded Bigfoot of Gene Patterson. Smozanik went all out to put on a good show for his home state fans. Unfortunately, this wasn't exactly what he had in mind. The Tropical Thunder does a nose stand, then crashes back down to earth, bringing the fence with it. Wayne was uninjured, protected by his machine's roll cage and safety harness, but his monster truck done for the day after this fence-clearing cartwheel. Let's look again. We see the big truck gets out of shape coming off the second set of cars and careens into the retention wall, shearing off the right front wheel. Then the Tropical Thunder topples over onto its front end, stands up and salutes the flag, then begins the slow descent back down through the fence. When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. To wrap up this look at Monster Truck Mayhem, we have Don Banloo qualifying in sloppy conditions at the Indy State Fairgrounds. The Magnum Force gets some big air and loses his left front wheel on impact. The big truck slides safely to a stop, and the 6-foot tire turns in a pretty respectable number. Banloo was uninjured in the mishap, but had some concern about where his wheel went. Well, it was waiting for him in the parking lot after the event. Next up, stock cars dive side by side into the turns with the pack drafting in behind like a 200-mile-an-hour freight train. Nothing quickens the pulse quite like it, unless, of course, you see this happening ahead of you. Resembling a train wreck, 13 cars go sprawling across the Charlotte Motor Speedway after the mishap in Turn 1. When the smoke cleared, most of the Busch Grand National drivers had walked clear of the wreckage. The main concern was Chad Little in the number 23, who hit the wall hard. Little suffered a fractured leg and shoulder in an accident that could have caused much worse injury. Now look to the left of your screen in this replay. As the 3 cars try to squeeze around the turn, the 33 car of Bobby Labonte and Chad Little in the 23 get forced outside, impacting the wall at full speed. Little at a nearly head-on angle. Both cars then spin back into the pack, causing wholesale destruction. Other drivers involved included Dale Jarrett, Derek Cove, Tracy Leslie, Morgan Shepard, and Sterling Marlin. This is the kind of an accident drivers describe as, well, that's just stock car racing. This aerial view gives us an idea just how widespread the destruction was. Right at the exit from pit row, 13 cars spin out of control, bouncing off the wall and each other. Now here you can see how momentum carries the 2 cars into the wall, then back into the pack, setting off the chain reaction. Watch the orange 72 of Tracy Leslie as he spins it into the inside retaining wall and right out into the path of Randy LaJoie's blue number 20. Of the 13 cars involved, 5 were able to return to the race. You know, NASCAR dictates that their cars be built so that the drivers can walk away. Now you're on board with Mark Martin as he's battling a cut tire and motioning the faster traffic to pass. Going into the big high bank turn, Martin gets nudged in the rear and is set into the wall. The Winston Cup competitors are caught with nowhere to go as Martin collects number 32 Dick Trickle and sets off a chain reaction. Here's the Bobby Helen view as he avoided the incident. Kyle Petty, Darrell Waltrip, and Rick Mass were just some of the big names that got into the melee along with Martin and Trickle. From this angle, you can see the number 3 car of many-time Winston chap Dale Earnhardt nudge Mark Martin's number 6 in the rear. At that point, there wasn't much Martin could do but just hold on. He gets turned around and watches as Trickle's Chevy slams him nearly head on. The rest of the pack plays the guessing game of where are they gonna go when I get there, ducking under the sliding cars. Some driving clear and some getting tangled up with other competitors who picked the same escape route. Here's how it looked and sounded in Mark Martin's Ford. Sounds like a pinball machine. Martin's car actually drove away from this one, further testifying to the safety in this sport. From Charlotte, we move to the 93 Daytona 500. On the backstretch on lap 169, 2 cars tangle and tap a third, sending it on a high-speed tumble in the infield of Daytona International Speedway. It's Rusty Wallace getting the worst of it as Derek Cope and Michael Waltrip slide to a stop in the grass. Here you can see just how quick Cope and Waltrip get together and send the unsuspecting Wallace into a terrifying high-speed tumble off the racecourse. It is also amazing to note, aside from the sheet metal, how intact Rusty's Pontiac stays, despite slamming repeatedly to the ground in this frightening high-speed end-over-end incident. As we take another look, we can see clearly that Michael Waltrip's yellow number 30 loses rear traction, forcing him into Cope's number 66. The 2 cars fall out of the draft and tag Wallace's machine, unleashing the uncontrolled fury of a Winston Cup car when it's upset at top speed. Want another look? You got it from Jeff Bodine's roof cam. As Waltrip and Cope get together, they push Wallace into a broadside slide at over 200 miles an hour. The air pressure suddenly rammed through the cockpit, punching out Rusty's windshield, which flies back and ricochets, boom, off of Bodine's roof. Amazingly, Rusty Wallace walked away from his wrecked car with no serious injuries. The world of AMA Supercross. Young gladiators in brightly colored armor beating themselves silly on dirt tracks for the fun and enjoyment of others. But seriously, these are some of the best conditioned athletes in all of motorsports. Lightning quick reflexes and iron-willed endurance are a must for a motocross racer. But before any of that will do you any good, you've got to get past the start. With so many riders in one place at one time, it's not at all unusual for an unplanned game of Twister to break out in the first corner. Let's see, right foot blue, left hand red. The main object is to stay on course and on your bike, avoiding hay bales whenever possible. Understand, they designed these courses to make it as difficult as possible for even the best to keep it together. Now, knowing every rider is facing the same hardships and the next guy might just hit you instead of the bales, you want to pick up the bike as quick as possible and get the heck out of there. But all kidding aside, the sport of motocross is as demanding and dangerous as any form of motorsport. And unfortunately, Dan Chu found this out at the Daytona Supercross. First, Scott Sheet gets in too deep on his Kawasaki, but he bails before the point of no return. Dan Chu, coming up on the right in white, wasn't so fortunate. He rode his bike right into the ground, hard. Chu walked away, but neurological problems surfaced later. And after 9 long, hard, tough, brave months, Dan Chu motocrossed again. Now let's pick up the action once again of NHRA drag racing. This is Kurt Johnson in the near lane facing off against arch rival Scott Jeffrey on in round 2 of the 1993 Phoenix race. No love lost between these two competitors. Johnson in the Oldsmobile, Jeffrey on in the Dodge. They were going all out to beat each other to the far end of the quarter mile. Jeffrey on red lighted, but seconds later, who won didn't really matter. Kurt Johnson did a NASCAR-style airborne self-destruct with Harry Scribner's Torco Oldsmobile.
No, come back here.
The NHRA Safety Safari, as always, on the scene before the dust had settled, moving in to get young Kurt out of the wreckage of his badly damaged race car. In this replay, Scott Shute is out, he's doing fine, but something appears to lock up on the Johnson car. It slides off the racetrack. As it leaves the paved surface, enough air gets under the car to lift it completely off the ground. As it hurtles backward through some standing water off the track, the car is thrown over onto its roof before slamming into the concrete retaining wall. The battered Pro Stocker, mangled and broken after the rough trip off the pad at Firebird Raceway, manages to land right side up. Credit the car builder and NHRA safety standards for the fact that Kurt Johnson, who went on to become Rookie of the Year, was unhurt after this nasty incident. Next, we have top alcohol dragster action. Keep your eyes on the near lane. That's Tiffany Hyland in the Pyroll machine. She's about to learn a lesson in the drag racing school of hard knocks. Hyland first loses traction, then control of her car, crossing the center line and ending up against the far wall. She breaks the engine loose and bends the front end of the car backwards. Then it's a long slide to a stop. The Safety Safari meets Tiffany as she coasts to a stop. She doesn't waste any time getting out of the car either. You know, that first wreck of a career can be a little frightening, but she was okay. Now, Kurt Johnson took another shot at it, this time in Topeka, in a brand new car. Watch the white car on the left side of your screen. Ouch! Into the wall and across the track for a taste of the other wall. He bent the oars up pretty good, but according to Kurt, it weren't nothing compared to the last time.
We did better than we did at Phoenix, that's for damn sure.
Now we move to top alcohol round 1 action at the 94 Chief Nationals in Dallas. Denny Hummel in the near lane gets off to a good start, but then works his way out of the groove, tries to compensate but loses it, and winds up all over the racetrack. Hummel walked away from this one with no problems, except for some noogies his crewman gave him for twisting up the race car. We wrap up our look at recent NHRA sportsmen and pro stock action with this unusual incident in qualifying at the 94 Winston Finals in Pomona. Big Ed Heck in the near lane takes his Trans Am for a wild ride. Safe. Other than his pride, Ed Heck was okay after his aerial backflip and long slide down the track. You know, once a competitor gets out of the racing groove and into the slick area along either side, all moves to correct the situation are amplified. Here we see Heck trying to keep control over his race car after getting out of shape early. He crosses the center line, goes up and over NASCAR style, just nicking the far wall. Ed passes the finish line on the roof of his Pontiac, grinding it down in a slow slide. with an excellent view of the track surface in the far lane at Pomona.
It seemed to happen real slow. It was almost like a amusement park ride. Expensive one.
Indeed. Road racing, the art of motorcycle riding. International competitors mount the best in two-wheel technology and push it to the limits in search of the ultimate prize in motorsport, victory. A rider in trouble wants to get clear of his bike and slide to safety. The key word here is slide. A high-speed tumble is going to bang up a rider, and in this case his bike too, making it difficult to return to the race. On road courses like here in Daytona, the twists and turns demand constant focus by the rider. Even a momentary lapse can send the competitor reeling just that quick. And as we've said before in motorcycle road racing, rule number 1, never touch. Oh, thank God for leather suits and the back protector these riders wear that you can't see. Save this guy. Now, in this incident, 600 Supersport rider Jason Pridmore rolls through an area where workers are clearing an earlier crash and lays down his bike. Number 5, Gerald Rothman Jr. is thrown off his ride and gets run over by a third bike. Pridmore was more than a little upset with the corner workers he felt should have prevented the incident. As we look again, Pridmore is entering the corner when his rear wheel slides out in what maybe could be oil left from the bikes that went down moments before. He lays his bike over and slides to safety, but Rothman Jr. isn't so lucky. He is pitched off his bike and tumbled. The rider in red can't avoid Rothman Jr.'s fallen motorcycle, hits it, and then rolls over Gerald on the grass and flips. Pridmore was so angry he threw himself down off the track. That's the sound of American iron doing battle on the road racing circuit. The Harley-Davidson Twin Sports had Loudon growl around the course in a style all their own. Powering into an uphill turn, number 240 Mark Pasteur lays it down. As he tries to return to racing, he sees another rider sliding towards him, and he has to drop his bike to dodge the incoming company. At the 94 Daytona 200, the lead pack moves through the International Horseshoe in a really beautiful procession of graceful power. But with no warning, one rider loses the handle on his superbike and brings down 2 others. You know, these guys really do look like Power Rangers, don't you think? Big Daddy Don Garlitz, wherever you are, thanks again for putting the driver in the front. We continue our NHRA Top Fuel Follies with the final round from the 94 Winter Nationals. Shelly Anderson in the far lane was facing Rance McDaniel for the title. Rance smokes the tires, Shelly streaks to victory, but something bad happened en route. She broke an input shaft, piece of shrapnel took off that right rear tire, and Shelly did one heck of a job of keeping that car off the wall. And her remark when she got out of the car was, "Hey, I won, didn't I? That's all that matters." Shelly Anderson, her second national event title in a very promising career. Five-time Winston champ Joe Amato demonstrated his abilities behind the wheel in the 94 Houston race. He begins to lose traction, smoking the big rear slicks when the right side tire lets go. Amato doing everything in his power to keep from hitting the wall or crossing the center line, which would mean disqualification, and his tricycle goes to the next round. A 13-year veteran, Amato knows the rules and certainly has the skills. Incredible. Now, here's the way it looked from the camera on board Amato's race car, from way up high on the wing. Boom, there the tire lets go. Amato uses just the right touch to keep the car pointed in the right direction and pilots the wounded race car across the finish line. Here's an example of a tire explosion that almost led to the worst-case scenario. In side-by-side qualifying in Sonoma, it was Connie Coletta in the near lane cutting a tire and paying an unexpected visit to the far lane directly in front of Stevie Foster. Foster does his best Nigel Mansell move to drive around Coletta, avoiding what could have been a much more serious incident. But for Connie Coletta of Michigan, who has always led his life on the edge, this really wasn't that big a deal. He didn't even break into a sweat. Brought the car to a safe stop. Safety Safari was there. They weren't really needed as Connie climbed out. Here in replay, we can see Coletta's tire disintegrate right there just before he reaches the finish line. Also, just as he reached top speed. Without his left rear wheel and a damaged wing, Connie loses control of the car and it strays over in front of Foster. Foster has no real time to think about what to do next. He cuts the car to the left, avoiding contact with Coletta, and then has to compensate to avoid hitting the near side wall.
Stevie Foster did a heck of a job of staying away from
I was really surprised, and I'm glad I seen him on the left-hand side when he come on around me. When we swapped over, I didn't have no control over it down there.
You know what? In 1984, I ran a 5-liter Can-Am car here. I would have been proud of that move back then. Man, all I saw was him come across in front of me. I figured the only thing I'm going to do, if I went to the right, I was going to take us both out, so I just went to the left, unloaded the other parachute. Thank the good Lord. Is Connie okay?
He's fine.
That's all that counts. We can fix these two clunkers.
That man is a piece of work. Have you ever gone somewhere and felt like you left something behind? Well, that's the feeling Doug Herbert had at The Rock in 1994. After a tremendous explosion, Herbert's car is left coasting down the quarter mile with half his engine block bouncing on the track behind him. The other half was left hanging over the side of the car, dragging on the racing surface. Doug Herbert was unharmed in the explosion, and the engine was nothing more than an expensive piece of junk, the worst I have ever seen. As his crew made final starting line adjustments, Tommy Johnson Jr. was prepared to take on Connie Coletta in the semifinals of the '94 Fram Southern Nationals in Atlanta. All looked well. TJ Jr. finished 10th in the '93 season. That also included his first ever Top Fuel victory. Here in Atlanta, though, Tommy was hungry for another win, and he had to get past Coletta to reach the finals. In a truly bizarre turn of events, the Mopar Express Lube Special's entire rear end came out of the car before it had barely cleared the starting line. Tommy Johnson Jr. was uninjured, as you can see in this incident, and actually didn't even know he was missing the rear axle assembly until he climbed out of the race car and said, "Where'd it go?" In this rear angle replay, you can see Tommy smoke the tires at the launch, tries to recover, but then in the cloud of smoke, the right rear tire strips away, and the whole rear end takes a hike from the rest of the frame, much to the surprise of Tommy and the racing press staked out on the starting line. Scatter, boys. As the wreck was wheeled away, you can see the bare nubs of the frame rails where only moments ago they had been connected to the rear end. Now, the last time we saw Joe Amato paired against Vinnie Bernstein, Bernstein got the wild ride. This time it was Joe's turn in round one of the '94 Pioneer Keystone Nationals. Amato fights a blown tire that almost puts him into the wall, then has to keep the car from crossing into the near lane and colliding with Bernstein. Joe manages to keep just enough of a grip on his tricycle race car to prevent a real catastrophe. Now, he expertly avoided the wall and Bernstein, but could not help clipping the timing device at the end of the track, disqualifying him from competition. He hated that worse than the actual incident. Here's a real-time replay of how things look from Amato's onboard camera. There goes the engine. That causes the tire to explode right there. Hang on, Jose.
It was going along great, and all of a sudden it just took a hard left one to the wall, and I don't know what happened back there, and I know Bernstein was nowhere to be found, so I pedaled it and And then all of a sudden it was on 3 wheels and I was just skating all around. And I still didn't see him, so I was just trying to keep it between the center line and get it over the finish line. I mean, that was my goal. I wasn't worried about crashing. I wanted to win.
Winning and walking away. That's what it's all about. Remember Jack Ostrander's frame-breaking top fuel jackknife we saw earlier in this episode? Well, at the Chief Nationals in '94, our old pal Jack was in for another white knuckler. Kind of like fingernails on a chalkboard, isn't it? Well, the Safari was right there to douse the flame and tend old Cadillac Jack. He was uninjured in the incident and removed himself from his battered top fuel race car. He is one tough customer, the bowling alley operator from Michigan. Well, that was a gutter ball, Jack, because right here we're going to see that left rear slick let go. Pop, forcing the car towards the wall. Luckily, the right side chute deploys, tugging the race car away from a head-on collision with the concrete. As the car spins off the wall, the parachute continues to help Ostrander avoid a more serious incident. And here, pulling back just enough to keep the car from tipping over and going into a devastating series of rolls. Sliding on its frame, Ostrander's machine then just slides to a stop. It's a game of inches, so the saying goes, and this incident proves that sometimes the unexpected little things can make all the difference as to whether or not a competitor walks away. Swamp buggy racing. Since 1949, the folks living on the outskirts of the Florida Everglades have been competing in this uniquely American motorsport. At the world-famous Mile of Mud in Naples, Florida, the swamp buggy racers go head-to-head for the title of King of the Swamp, and to take the traditional dip into the sippy hole with the beautiful Swamp Queen. We pick up the action at the 1993 Dr. Pepper Classic as Al Doria in his showdown machine leads the pack into the first turn. Doria takes it too hot into the corner and rolls the big swamp buggy. Now these machines are built with a high center of gravity and are easy to turn over. But other than a face full of Florida swamp water, Doria was okay. Now here's a look from on board the Fatal Attraction machine driven by Bonnie Jolly. She and her husband Don are both competitors in the sport, and in this heat Bonnie is looking to go for the inside line and the shortest way around the course. She moves past the competitors on the outside and heads for the turn. Jolly rolls her Fatal Attraction swamp buggy as we rode along. Shaken but uninjured, Bonnie begins to release herself to get clear of the overturned machine as safety personnel are on the scene in seconds. In this replay, we can see that Bonnie Jolly caught the right front tire on the inside berm and high side of the vehicle, throwing the buggy off balance and into the drain. Bonnie did not walk away. She kind of hopped, actually, as she hurt her ankle in her haste to get out of the swamp buggy. Good idea to stay in there until they right it before you hit those belts, Bonnie. In the same event, Lenny Dunn on the right in the stand-on machine faced Terry Langford in the near lane in the Rubber Duck. This was a marquee matchup for the event as both men are former kings of the swamp. As they reach the first turn, each driver follows his own line through. On the outside, Dunn rolls it over. That's what happens when you stand on it too hard here in the swamp. Langford moves on to win the race as Lenny Dunn, back on the side of the swamp, is able to restart his machine, albeit too late, and rolls back in the swamp with nothing more than a bent wing and a wounded pride. I'm telling you, they are tough down here on the Mile of Mud. Lenny says, safe. As we pick up with action on waters of the unlimited hydroplane circuit, we see the crew of the Circus get a little heated up as pilot Dave Vilwatt leaves the dock prior to the race. They were out of there. Former Rookie of the Year Nate Brown was in the cockpit of the Tide entry racing on the Columbia River in 1993 when he lost control of the race boat. The boat landed upside down, submerging the cockpit where Brown was strapped into his seat and breathing off an air tank. Here you can see in slow motion how hydroplanes can give gravity a bad name. Once the propeller is out of the water, the forward momentum is gone and the raceboat cartwheels back into the river. After the rescue team removed Nate Brown from his cocoon, he was unharmed and returned in the tide at the very next race. This is action from the final heat of the '93 Seattle race with Mark Tate of the Winston Eagle battling Chip Hanauer in the Miss Budweiser. Tate took the lead here in lap 2 and was looking for the win when the race boat took off. The boat came down right on top of the safety canopy, causing severe damage to the cockpit as well as the rest of the boat. Taking another look, we can see the Winston accelerate almost straight up off the water's surface. As the bottom of the hull catches the air, she flips over backward and impacts back into the water upside down. Judging by the look of the fractured cockpit, rescue workers on the scene, well, they expected the worst. Tate was knocked unconscious from the crash, but amazingly, he walked away with only bruises, a broken finger, and he lost a filling. Since the safety canopy became part of the unlimited hydroplane scene, not one driver's life has been lost. God bless the engineers. We will wrap up our Thunderboat coverage with pilot Ken Dryden and his 3-point hydro ENunn. In qualifying, Dryden and his race boat do an almost aerobatic loop-de-loop. The boat lands hard back on its hull, snapping off the front end of the cockpit. As you can hear, the crowd lakeside was stunned by this one. And in replay, we'll see this unique hull launch off the water like a fighter from a carrier deck. But unlike in a warplane, pilot Dryden has no control over where or how his craft will land. Unfortunately for Ken, this landing was a hard one. He had fractures in both legs, but was expecting to return to race in 1995. We go one more time to NHRA Funny Car Competition, this time at the '94 season opener in Pomona, and side-by-side qualifying between Ray Higley and Wyatt Radke. Radke out of shape and pays a visit to Mr. Higley in the far lane. Hello, how do you do? Higley crosses the center line after getting tagged by Radke, but there were no injuries and minimal damage to the cars. In the semifinals of the '94 Gators in Gainesville, Florida, Chuck Etchells in the far lane faced Casey Spurlock in the lane nearest the camera. At the finish, it was Spurlock winning, but no one was watching the scoreboard. All eyes were on the Kendall Dodge and Chuck Etchells, a tremendous fire. Etchells scrubbed up a lot of speed against the wall and brought it to a stop, and then set about the business of escaping the inferno. As the safety safari screeched to a halt to fight the blaze, Chuck was out of the car and safe. Credit the veteran driver's experience and the safety gear for enabling Chuck to walk away from this one.
You can tell by the helmet there was lots of smoke and fire inside that car, and Chuck, I don't have to tell you, that was one of the worst ones anyone's had in a long time. You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine, Steve, thanks.
Breathing is usually the biggest problem in those hills.
Well, it shocked me, because it looked like we were starting to drive away from him, and all of a sudden, bang. Not good.
Not good indeed. As Spurlock passes, Etchells grinds his car up along the guardrail to bring it to a stop. Blinded by smoke and fighting for breath in the furnace-like atmosphere of his cockpit, Etchells somehow finds his way through the escape hatch. Brave men, these funny car pilots. But no matter how fearless, no one would be willing to take the ride Jerry Caminito took in qualifying at the '94 Mid-South Nationals. Caminito hit the railing at nearly 280 miles an hour, cartwheeling to the ground so hard the wreckage cut our camera cable. It was suddenly very quiet at Memphis. In replay, watch the left spill plate on the rear spoiler. It comes off, the aerodynamic downforces are lost on the rear of the car, it turns violently to the left, cuts a tire and drives through the metal guardrail. Jerry's shattered car continues on a gut-wrenching end-over-end tumble off the track in Memphis, plowing up the ground and planting broken pieces of his race car. Caminito stayed strapped into his seat inside the roll cage, but at the very end, exited the bottom of the race car. At 279 miles per hour, that's the fastest anyone has ever hit a stationary object and lived to tell the tale. The hole in the guardrail says it all. Miraculously, Jerry Caminito did survive his high-speed impact. He suffered 2 broken legs, however, and was medevaced from the track by helicopter. Jerry and his wife, Marion, hope to race again. Later that year, at the Keystone Nationals, hard-charging Al Hoffman faced Whit Bazemore in the first round of eliminations. Nope, not Whit this time. It's Al Hoffman who takes a lesson from hydroplane racing and lifts off the racetrack. Whoa! From this ISO camera replay, Al looks like he's just floating on a cushion of air down the race course, which is exactly what he was doing. Only the landing wasn't exactly what you'd call cushy. Hoffman was uninjured. 1994 will be the year that 24-year-old Del Worsham would just as soon forget. Like Whit Bazemore the year before, the former NHRA Rookie of the Year spent the summer of '94 walking away. He got things started at the season opener in Pomona, exploding a tire and shattering his Oldsmobile body. He was okay. Now the hissing sound you hear in the background of that steam-looking stuff coming out of the fender wells, that is the onboard fire system still doing its job. He wasn't sure if he was on fire or not, and he wasn't taking any chances. Now, just 3 weeks later, while qualifying for the Gators, Del lit it up big time. What started as a very small blaze suddenly multiplied into this. He was able to bring the car to a safe stop and exit through the roof hatch. Notice the long snorkel on his helmet. That's something Del built himself. It connects to an emergency air supply so he can breathe in one of these deals. He'd need it again before the summer was through. In Englishtown, Worsham had a new body on his car as he came to the line in side-by-side qualifying with Casey Spurlock. Brand new car, same old problems. Del streaked down the track like a meteor. The blazing funny car, its fiberglass body fully engulfed in flame, finally came to a stop off the end of the racetrack. The safety safari began pouring water on the fire to knock down the flames and get Worsham out of the cockpit. He needed that emergency air supply in this one. In replay, you'll see the fire start well before the finish line and grow rapidly as Del heads down track. His parachutes are rendered useless as they're burned away in seconds by the intense oil fire. No doubt the brakes are boiling as well and not at peak efficiency. The machine almost picks up momentum, kind of like the incredible fire now burning out of control both outside and under the car. From this far end angle, Del Worsham's funny car looks like something from a horror movie as it moves down the racetrack, burning and sizzling, spewing noxious clouds of impenetrable smoke. All the while, Del is inside the inferno, struggling to survive in the driver's seat of this real-life hell on wheels. Worsham was treated for burns and smoke inhalation after this fire. Spent a few weeks in the hospital for some skin grafts. He's completely recovered and now driving a top fuel car on the circuit. Maybe doesn't want to sit behind that motor anymore, huh? Couldn't blame him. None of the competitors you have seen in this production would be able to beat the odds time and time again were it not for the unsung heroes of motorsports, the safety and rescue teams. These brave men and women are on hand whenever professional motor racing drivers slip into their fire suits, strap on their helmets, and face the dangers that they must overcome in search of the checkered flag. Be it on the super speedway, the liquid oval, in the dirt, or on the quarter mile, if it weren't for the safety crews, there would be no speed records, no record ETs, no victorious drivers in the winner's circle, because without safety, there would be no motorsports at all. I'm Steve Evans. So long. Until next time. Want the best seat in the house for motorsports entertainment? Then Diamond P Sports is your ticket for excitement. From over 40 spectacular titles in the growing Diamond P inventory, you can build a home video library of your favorite motorsports action that you'll enjoy for years to come. For the drag racing enthusiast, Diamond P annually presents the entire NHRA Championship season in review. You get all the dramatic action as the best drivers chase the elusive NHRA Championship crowns. Beginning with Drag Racing 86, you can pick and choose from the entire library of season-long highlights. For an exciting and comprehensive look at recent drag racing history, there's Decade of Thrills and Decade of Thrills 2, examining the most chilling, agonizing, and emotion-filled moments of the 70s and 80s. Now, funny car fans can't get enough of Fabulous Floppers 1 and 2. The sound and excitement of Pro Stocks takes the stage in Hot Rods from Detroit, and Top Fuel is What's Hot in Kings of the Sport. Interested in the legends of drag racing? Diamond P fills the bill with a dynamic story of Don Prudhomme and 2 videos on the one and only Big Daddy, Garlett's The Legend and Garlett's 2, The Legend Lives On. Now, if you're a drag racing history buff, you can trace the evolution of NHRA in Gathering Speed. For those who like their racing loud and raw, don't miss Top Fuel Sensations, the sights and sounds and smell of record-breaking performance, and Challenge of Fire, the thunder and fury of side-by-side jet car racing. If it's monster trucks, mud racing, and tractor pulling that cranks you up, then Shake, Battle, and Roll and Shake, Battle, and Roll 2 are for you. For racing of the H2O variety, there's Thunderboats, a fascinating look at 200-mile-an-hour hydroplanes and the fearless men who pilot them. Sprint car fans love the unpredictable winged whirl of outlaws from the Knoxville Nationals. Beginning with Knoxville 87, you can get the entire collection of annual mayhem. And fasten your seatbelt for a treacherous journey as Up, Over, and Off-Road takes you from the Baja Desert to outrageous stadium racing. For two-wheel fans, the amazing aerial dogfighting called Supercross fuels the intensity for the flight to the finish. If you're a truck enthusiast, hey, you can't beat the 3-volume set entitled Truckin' Trilogy. It's all the best trucks, competition, and locales from the Truckin' USA TV series. Wanna go drag racing? Well, 2-time funny car champion and drag racing instructor Frank Hawley takes you from street to strip in this informative video that explains procedures and concepts it sometimes takes years for even veteran racers to get a handle on. Diamond P Sports brings you the story of Bernie Little, the owner of Miss Budweiser, the most recognized name in racing. Mr. Unlimited recalls a career that spans 3 decades in unlimited hydroplane racing. Share the ups, downs, elation, and sorrows. Once a used car salesman, now a multi-millionaire and the owner of the most famous racing boat ever to turn a rock. If you're ready for more mud and monster trucks, you'll want the 3rd installment of Shake, Battle, and Roll. It's more of the mud racing mishaps and monster truck tribulations that Diamond P Sports fans demand. Shake, Battle, and Roll 3 is sure to satisfy the mud-thirsty monster lover in you. Out of the Everglades and the Diamond P archives, perhaps the most unusual motorsport ever, swamp buggy racing. Swamp Fever spans a decade of the most outrageous amphibious vehicles ever to cross the Sippy Hole. Swamp Fever, watch out, it's catching. And finally, to complete your library, you must include the best-selling series of And They Walked Away, volumes 1, 2, and 3. Here are the most breathtaking moments from the Diamond P archives, racing's most spectacular spins, flips, wrecks, and fires, and in each perilous incident, the driver beats the odds. To order any of these terrific videos or to receive a full-color catalog detailing all of the titles available, just call 1-800-421-0725 or write to the address on your screen. Diamond P Sports. We make motorsports come alive.